Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to the NCA for inviting me. So my name is Sarah Teresa McGhee. I currently work as a consulting analyst for the Association of American Medical Colleges in Washington, D.C. So I work in the field of academic medicine and science. So I'm technically still in higher ed, but I work with medical school, faculty, staff, and leadership. So 5 years ago, when I started looking for resources about how to pursue a career off the tenure track, there weren't nearly as many resources available as there are today. And one of the reasons for that is people like me who've had success are given the opportunity to share their experiences, like at this NCA PrepTalk. Now, I've given somewhat similar talks before, and it's come to my attention that the audience is typically made up of three groups of people. People actively looking for an alt-act job, people thinking about looking for an alt-act job, and people are thinking about looking for an alt-act job, but don't want anybody to know about it, so you're hiding somewhere in the back. Right? So come forward, because today I want to have a conversation. Do you want to come forward? I know I'm mic'd up, but let's be a tribe. Let's be a group. So in keeping with the spirit of the conference theme, communication at play, I toyed with the idea of trying to memorize everything, and I just said, no, I'm not an actress, that's not gonna work, and this is good stuff. So I'm gonna do the extemporaneous thing and read off my notes. So today's theme is filling the gap. All right, all of you should be familiar with this, because as our goal as researchers is to fill the gap in the research literature. So when employers are posting for a job, they're trying to fill a gap too. They need someone who will help them fulfill their mission, essentially their core purpose, advance their vision, which is reach their aspirations for the future, and they're also looking for someone who will fit into their organizational culture. So they're asking themselves, is this somebody who's going to really embrace the way we do things about here, right? Are they going to get the work done the way we like to get the work done? So when I was thinking about my own experience looking for work and doing research on this topic, I asked myself the question, with all these resources, what's missing from this conversation? As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of stuff out there, but what was the gap that I could fill today? I thought about the stories we tell ourselves about reasons we won't get hired, and I know we all got a lot of them, I know I did. And I realized I had assumptions, but I had not really explored whether those assumptions were true. Most of these assumptions had to do with the prejudices I thought employers held about hiring people with advanced degrees, especially people with PhDs who didn't have a lot of experience outside of academia. So I live and work in DC. I did the DC thing, right? I reached out to my network. I asked friends of friends who are recruiters and hiring managers what concerns they had about hiring people outside of academia. And a question that kept coming up over and over again was, it's a very exciting question, so it's a lot of build-up. Why? Okay. It's because they don't live in our world, most of them. So they didn't understand why, after you've dedicated years of your life to getting this degree, taking out the student loans, no nights, no weekends, 200-page dissertation, would you decide not to pursue the job you spent a good portion of your adult life training to do? Right? They don't get it. So if you're sitting in this room right here, you have the answer to that question. Now, some of you said it's hard to articulate, and I understand, but there's a reason, right? There's a reason, probably a few. If you read the alt-act job blogs, you can find out other people's answers. And previous NCA prep talks have also addressed this why question. But the people I spoke with, they're not looking at those resources. So they assume that someone who was applying for a job at their organization who had a PhD was doing so because they just didn't know what else to do, right? And therefore, they were essentially going to be a flight risk. One head of a recruitment firm I spoke to relayed the story about a client who flat out said, don't send me anyone with a PhD. Just don't. Don't even want to look at that resume. And they would have rather had someone with like 2 MAs, that was fine. But they believed that someone with a PhD was not going to fully dedicate themselves to the job. They were just going to use the job, pay the bills, kill time, until they figured out what they really wanted to do, right? So they were going to be a flight risk. They were not a good investment. So how do we answer this question? Well, first, what are you genuinely interested in pursuing? And this can be very broad. In fact, I would encourage you, unless you feel incredibly drawn to something, don't limit yourself too much too early. Okay? And why? The job you're a great fit for may be a position you don't know exists. And you may not realize there's a place for you in an industry you find fascinating. But you do have to start somewhere. Okay, so in my case, how can I back this up, right? Well, we'll get to that. In my case, I was interested in working in international development because of my prior experience as a Peace Corps volunteer. It's also something I focused on in my dissertation and in my graduate school research. So I was like, okay, big, broad international development. I also identified the geographic region where most of the organizations I was interested in working for were located, and that was Washington, D.C. I had friends living in the area, and they told me that the way people got jobs in D.C., and particularly in that industry, was moving there and building a network. And I was talking to them during NCA 2013. And the first time I heard that advice, I was like, you are crazy. I'm going to go somewhere where I don't have a job on the hope that I'm going to get a job, you know, and I'm, you know, how does that work? And they're like, you want to get a job here? You got to move here. You got to meet people. You got to build your network. You know, you got to volunteer. You got to put yourself out there. That's what you got to do. Very rarely do they come to you, right? Especially if you're not coming from a specific, you know, discipline where they come to your job fairs or they come to your discipline fairs, which, as we talked about, they don't. You got to go to them. And so that's what I did. And yes, I applied for a lot of jobs online on what is coming to be known as the old-fashioned way. But I also set up informational meetings to learn about the industry and jobs in that field. And at first this was really difficult until people pointed out to me that I added value to those conversations too. Because they were learning about the communication discipline. They were learning about all that I had to offer. They were learning about my life. They were learning about my career trajectory and why people who had gotten a PhD might decide to take another path. So those conversations were valuable, and especially in DC, it's about building your network, right? So if they talk to me and maybe I'm not a good fit for something, I might be a good fit for something else that a friend of theirs knows, right? Favors are traded, welcome to the district. Right. Okay. So when I had an opportunity to meet with someone, I made sure that I could explain why the opportunity I was pursuing was the natural next step for me professionally, right? No excuses, no apologizing. This makes sense. This is your truth. This is what you honestly want to do, right? So just be able to articulate why, you know, address their concerns. Why are you doing this? Because you genuinely want to do this, not just because you're killing time, not just because you need to pay the bills. Okay. And if you get yourself into a position of actually talking to somebody with influence, take advantage of it. Drop the elevator pitch, okay? Just drop it. Have a conversation. Why do I not like elevator pitches? Because they're impersonal, because they're rehearsed. You know, somebody's taking the time to talk to you, they want to learn about you, and they want to understand that you've taken the time to learn about why their organization is special. Now, I'm not saying don't talk about your skills. In fact, that's the next thing we're going to talk about. But don't forget that in a conversation with potential employers or people who have influence in an industry, focus on what makes them, their mission, and their organizational vision special. And why do your values align with their organizational values? Right? A lot of this is about personality fit. When I talk to these recruiters, they're like, okay, we can see the skills, but do we like the person? Right? Are they going to get along with people? Right? Again, are they going to fit into our organizational culture and embrace the way we do things around here? Okay, so moving on to skills. So when qualifications are listed for a position, they're typically separated and referred to as soft and hard skills. Now, it doesn't say soft and hard skill in the job description, but the language people use to discuss them, they put them into these two categories. So soft skills are considered desirable personality traits like motivated, reliable, necessary skills that are unfortunately often undervalued because the characteristics listed are considered the bare minimum a candidate should possess. Like, of course we want somebody who's reliable, that's going to show up on time, that's motivated, right? That doesn't make you special, type of thing. There's even a push now to refer to what are called soft skills as evergreen skills, because soft has such a negative connotation of being a synonym for like easy, as in easy to obtain. Whereas hard skills are considered difficult to obtain, and therefore more weight is placed upon their value. So the National Association of Colleges and Employers puts out a top key attributes list every year. You can go on their website, you can figure out how they tabulated everything. And it's interesting because the top key attributes are mostly soft skills, right? So again, they're valued, but they're undervalued. Especially communication, right? Communication skills are regularly highly desirable soft skills. It will always be in there. But they're the most highly valued, undervalued skills a candidate can bring to the table. So this leaves us with a dilemma. So how do you package communication as a hard skill? Right, this is what you want to try and achieve. So recognize that hard skills are generally job-specific skills. And you are a subject matter expert. Everybody say that, raise your hand. I am a subject matter expert, right? I'm not a lowly candidate. I'm not somebody who's just like, I don't know what I'm doing. You know what you're doing. You are a subject matter expert, and you bring a lot to the table. So frame your skills as a subject matter expert to fit the job-specific skills required for that position. Now, we've all heard this before, like mirror your skills to fit the job description, right? But really concentrate on, this is a hard skill. You are a subject matter expert. So the thing you want to do is make it a hard skill to make it quantifiable. Be specific. Answer the question. This is what everybody wanted to know, right? Make sure you can answer this question. How have you used your expertise in communication to help solve a problem? Well, you've done things like this, right? Analytical skills. This is what people don't realize when they talk about communication as a soft skill. You have tons of analytical skills, right? That's what we do, right? We analyze, we look for problems, we identify solutions. You have technical writing skills, You've created presentations for specific audiences, right? Facilitation skills. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody can craft those messages for a specific audience. Not everybody has the breadth of writing skills you do. Trust me, I've been out there, right? Don't forget the analytical, right? Highly, highly valued. And project management skills. If you're an ethnographer like me, all right, you've been out in the field, you designed research studies, you dealt with logistics, budgeting. Everybody in this room has written a proposal for a dissertation where you identified the scope of a project. You have proposal writing experience, right? You identified the scope of a project. You identified the resources you would need to achieve it. You identified a timeline. You're already doing this. So now that you've identified all the skill sets you have, it's time to evaluate what's missing. But trust me, this is the fun part. This was the adventure. So where is the gap in your qualifications? What experience do you need? And once again, once you identify the field you're interested in pursuing, you're going to see similar job ads and you're going to see similar qualifications. And you're going to realize, okay, I have this, this, and this, but I need a little more of this. So how are you going to get that? How can you get marketable experience, right? Volunteer opportunities. Okay, are there short courses you can take? Are there certifications? Some people have talked to me as I was going around the audience that they've already started to pursue this. Good for you. I did not. I had to play a game of catch up. And keep in mind that professional development skills are something you're always going to be working on. Just if you get a job, somebody else is probably going to pay for it. You won't have to fork out the money for it, which is great, right? Do you need one-on-one coaching, all right? Do you have, and this doesn't always have to cost a lot of money. I have friends who are entrepreneurs setting up their own sort of businesses doing this, and they said, okay, you need coaching help? I'll give you some help if you write me a review. Right? When you think about experience, have to think of it a little bit untraditionally. So for me, I recognized that in my heart, I knew I wanted to continue using ethnographic research methods, but I had to work on getting more quantitative skills. And ideally, I wanted to be out in the field. That's where I love. I wanted to do field work. But I also knew I needed experience in an office setting. And that's something people don't think about. Well, why did I need experience in an office setting? I'd worked in offices before, but it was like a temp. I wasn't that invested, wasn't really paying attention. But I wanted to learn how people interact with one another. What is the modern day office etiquette? How do people solve day-to-day conflicts? And in my experience, that's very different than interacting with people in an academic department. All right, so what did I do? I looked at a couple of organizations and I ate some humble pie and went to them and said, yeah, with my PhD, I'd like to volunteer to work on different projects. And I explained why, again, this was the natural choice for me in my career trajectory. This made sense. At first, it didn't make sense to them, but once I laid it out, they're like, oh, that makes sense. We would love to have you. Yeah, we would love to have somebody with your skills. And then I could put my name on projects. I could get this experience, and I could also get those references. Very important. So I volunteered at American Red Cross headquarters in DC and worked on several projects in the International Services, International Humanitarian Law Division. And that fulfilled a lot of goals, and I made a lot of connections. But things didn't happen right away. Right? For months, I was adjuncting, working at other odd jobs. Sorry, just as I said that, the litany of jobs just went through my mind. I was at a yoga studio. I was doing other stuff. I was volunteering. I was Skyping. I was meeting with people. And I was literally just putting myself out there, constantly putting myself out there. I was looking, and I was looking to be found, right? Put yourself out there. Very rarely are they going to come to you. Go out there, you know, say, look, I'm available. Do you need some help doing this? And at first, like I said, people may not understand, like, well, we have a PhD, why are you doing this? Just explain it. Explain why this is the natural progression for you professionally. So one day, I'm on the metro. Red line, red line. I strike up a conversation with a man who works for an organization I didn't know existed. He's in a field never really heard of, but he's also an ethnographer, right? And so we're like, hey, he's like, I never get to speak my language. Let's talk ethnography. So during our 20-minute ride together, I learned more about him. He learns more about me. I ask if I can link in with him, you know, which I've done to probably numerous people on the metro that I just started off conversations with, like, hey, are you doing this? Oh, yeah, can I link in with you? Yeah. We politely part ways. I follow up with an email, as I often do when people offer their contact info. And within a week, I get a call from him. He had actually followed up, looked at my LinkedIn profile, and was impressed. And he asked me if I was interested in applying for a postdoc position at the organization where I currently work. Okay, that's spoiling the ending of the story, but the devil is saying again, I'd never heard of the Association of American Medical Colleges. I didn't realize that in DC, there are so many association headquarters, and there's a lot of work for us there. It didn't occur to me to, like, how can I work for an association? Not at all, especially not one that was involved in medicine. And what's interesting is that I've always had an interest in medicine, but I didn't know where I fit in. I didn't really even do health comp, you know? So I didn't realize that there were opportunities to work with medical schools unless you were an MD or a basic scientist. So obviously, this was a great opportunity. But getting back to calculating how much you're willing to invest. I'm going to be straight up with you. Being a postdoc in a city like DC, I did not get to quit adjuncting like all the different places. And there was no guarantee that I was going to be able to be hired on anywhere. All right, so this was, you know, this wasn't another calculated risk, a calculated investment, but it made sense for me to grow professionally. And I've come to love the field of academic medicine and science. And so after I successfully completed the postdoc, I was offered another position that never existed before, my current one as consulting analyst. And incidentally, my current position was created because our organization recognized a gap in services for our members. Okay. So to finish up, I want you to keep your options open. I just told a story about how I got 2 jobs that never existed before in a field I'd never heard of by meeting somebody on the metro, because I took a risk and I moved to a city where I didn't have a job on the advice that people told me who knew about this industry, who knew about how people got jobs in DC. All right, so I think we're moving out of time here. I know you have questions, but I want to start off by making sure I run through these. Okay, do you have time? Okay. So I have 3 challenge questions for you. And you can just think of these on your own. So what is an industry that interests you? I talked about my interest in medicine was something I was really interested in, but I thought international development I was also interested in because I thought I would never get a job with anything related to medicine. I was wrong. Why do you believe there's no place for someone like you in that industry? I never actually pursued my false belief before. So how do you know this belief is true? Next question. How have you used your expertise in communication to help solve a problem? when you answer that question, identify the hard skill in that story. Because you are what? Subject matter experts. Exactly. Third question, identify one skill you would like to add to your skill set. What is the cost of gaining that skill? Okay. Now, for me, there was the economic cost, but there was also, I said, I had to be a little bit humble about it. You know, I went to organizations who at first were like, you have a PhD and you're volunteering for free? I was like, yes, I am. Here's why. Because here's what I want to do, and here's how I can help you, and here's why this makes sense. And I made a lot of contacts that way, right? We forget, because we're surrounded by people that have advanced degrees, that not everybody does, even in Washington, D.C., right? I'm often the only person in the group that has a PhD. Now, not when I'm at the medical school. Still there, I'm dealing with MDs, PhDs, you know, everything possible behind your name. But they still take me seriously, because I'm a subject matter expert in a field that they are not. Okay. All right. So thank you so much for listening. So we're going to do questions? Yeah, okay. Oh, thanks. Right, and I know we met before, but I'm afraid. Okay.
First of all, thank you for speaking.
Just hold on one second. Do we have a way we can mic the questions? Because they're very valuable.
Yeah, we don't have a handheld mic. I'm okay with Lily. So just loud, stand up.
Project.
Well, my question.
I'm going to start staying close to you. So.
Could you speak a little bit about how you have converted your CV to a resume, or where did you reflect those hard skills in resume form?
Absolutely, and again, it has to do with asking for help. I went online and I researched people who specifically work with individuals who are transitioning. And again, this was like 5 years ago, so the market was a little bit smaller, things were a little cheaper. And so I started asking those questions about, and she pointed out to me, you know, I was like, you know, I don't have publications, I don't have all these publications, I'm worthless. And she's like, no, you're not. For one, you wrote a 200-page dissertation, you've written all these papers, but besides that, you've worked professionally on 4 different continents, right? You've run 2 different research studies out of the country. You know, you hired your own people, you wrote the proposals, you did your own, you know, logistics. So have somebody who works in a field that you are interested in, look at that and say, okay, where are the hard skills here, right? That speaks that language, because multiple industries have different languages, right? And hard skills are job specific. So they're going to want to hear things differently. They're going to want you to speak their language on that resume. So again, I know that's kind of like a broad question, but keep in mind, not everybody's speaking the same language. Okay.
You said that you ran studies in other countries. Was that while you were a student?
Yeah.
I'm wondering how we can translate our academic experience into and get value out of it on a professional resume.
Pretty much everything you've done. For me, as an ethnographer, I was doing my field work for my master's and dissertation in different countries. So I was, you know, an ethnographer. I was putting together these field work studies. I was recruiting people, research subjects. I was doing all the budgeting, the planning, even had to hire drivers and translators. So that worked well when I was applying for jobs in international development, because they want people who can hit the ground running, right, in a foreign country. But so what are you studying?
So I'm studying health comm.
Okay.
I'm a registered nurse, and I want to marry those 2 fields in my professional career. So everything you're saying is very relevant.
Yeah.
I want to work in medication adherence science, help people take their medicines properly.
So who have you been talking to about this within that discipline?
A little bit of everybody. So
Okay.
anthropologists, health communication scholars, and nurses.
Okay. And so I would think about, you know, if there's not a job title for what you want to do, what would that be?
I want to work in clinical trials, so
Okay.
like a principal investigator or a clinical research associate, something like that.
Right. So I think about go and pursue that, right? Because you already have the name for it, and it sounds like you have the qualifications. So what's stopping you from going, and is it just a fear? What are you worried about? Okay, so this is the,
I have clinical experience as a nurse, but I don't have working experience as a researcher, but I have all of my research experience from my time in school.
so you do have, so you're worried about doing, you haven't done basic science, or like
I
hard
haven't
research.
worked for a pharmaceutical company or
Okay.
a company that does clinical trials. I've only done research, in academic settings.
Okay. You are still valuable to them. So I would figure out, again, you've identified an industry, right? So again, start having those conversations, because a lot of times what helped me is those people led me to the answers to my questions because they worked in that field, right? And a lot of times we're not able to see the value that we bring, right? So I would, again, do the challenge, think about how are you going to pursue this, you know? Who are you going to call? I thought nobody would meet with me. People were more than happy to meet with me because they saw that I brought value, and that's how people get jobs these days, is they find somebody who they meet, they know, they can trust, they reflect. I mean, there's still open job calls. You still have to put it in there, but you're one step ahead if the people have actually met you. So it sounds like you have a lot of fear that you're just not good enough and there's no place for you, but you haven't confirmed that, right? You have not confirmed that. So I would go investigate it more. I know you bring a lot to the table, especially as a registered nurse, especially with somebody pursuing an advanced degree. Okay, other questions?
I don't know if you said this before, and I'm sorry, I walked in late. Were you actually so did you have a full-time teaching job and then you transitioned? Like, what did your transition look like? And I'm asking specifically for myself because I'm tired of having these visiting positions, and I'm tired of, because the state of the institution, like, if you think
Yeah.
of the academy, like, it doesn't matter if somebody wants you, the money's not there, the money's not there, and then, every year you have to move.
Yeah, you have to work harder for less money.
Yeah.
Yeah, I decided kind of around the time of the recession that, my friends who had multiple publications were on the job market and they weren't getting anything for like 2-3 years. So that's when I decided, okay, I've got to right now figure out what I can do to diversify my skill sets. Yeah, so 08, 09, I was already 2 years in, so I was too in to get out. So, and then the more I did, I was really drawn to applied work. I didn't want to spend my life writing things that only people who are going to read it were the ones who are also writing to get something else that somebody else is going to read. I've just always been a very applied person. I do a lot of advocacy work now. I've done, if you go on my LinkedIn profile, you'll see a lot of my advocacy work. So I was just very drawn to being able to work with people and see those results, work them through those results. And so, and again, I had difficulty publishing, and that's the name of the game, right? If you can't get all these publications, you're not going to get a job.
And it doesn't have anything to do with your writing skills. It's everything to do with the people that you know. In this specific, because you'll notice.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it just wasn't, to put it broadly, I was not a good fit. Other people wanted it more, and they deserve to have it. So why should I chase something that I don't really want? Then I'm that person, right, who's a flight risk. I'm the person who's just doing it. And I think I've always just been kind of a risk taker. I've been an entrepreneurial type spirit. So I wanted to go out and do something. I saw that the world was changing, the academic landscape was changing, and you're better to be in front of it than behind it, right? It's a little scary, but in the long run, you're better to be in front of it than behind it. So yeah, I had adjuncting experience, which helped, right? But I did not have a tenure track position that I walked away from.
And a lot of people are doing that now.
Right. I'm actually on a panel tomorrow, I believe it's at 2, about people who've done both. Some who've gone from academia into the private sector, nonprofit, and some who've done the opposite. So we can follow up with that. Right, anybody? Okay, I don't know who had a question.
Are there sites for all-track jobs that you could let us know about? And 2, how do you find postdocs in other fields that you could then say this is what?
You know what I never knew about? There's a National Postdoc Association. Yeah, now it's mostly for the basic scientists, right? And this is where we get in trouble because people don't, again, I think COM is a little bit behind the game with putting their postdoc positions into that national pipeline. But there is a National Postdoc Association that's based in DC. So I would go on their website, look there.
Are you saying postdoc or?
Postdoctoral positions. That was your question, right? Postdoctoral, right. Actually, my boss, Dr. Kevin Grigsby, does a lot of work with them, and he's advocated for postdocs' rights. So then you can look at salary structures, multiple things about there, because in all fields we have the problems with postdocs getting abused. Right? And there was a second part to your question. What was
Is
it?
there an alt-track like site for jobs for comp PhDs, like they don't want to go?
There should be, and let's create that. Where at a couple, when I talked about this before, we've tried to create networks of passing along information, and I think the way we're just going to have to do it is creating our own informal networks about sharing those positions. Like I said, I just identified an industry that I thought it was a good fit, and I just started talking to people, right? Washington, D.C. is a great place where, like I said, there's a lot of work. I didn't know that we were so valuable to associations, and a lot of associations have their headquarters in D.C. or there's some other place. Like, there's people getting jobs all over the country, right? We're often our own worst enemy, because we've been told, well, you didn't publish a lot, so you've wasted, I don't know how many years of your life, goodbye. That is not true, okay? That's not true at all. Don't tell yourself that story. Or you won't be hireable, because you're not confident. You know, people will believe that you don't bring, if you don't believe you bring anything to the table, neither will anybody else, so.
Who are you taking or asking to meet with when you want to volunteer? Are you going through HR or what's the job title? Who's the person I'm looking
Yeah.
to talk to about volunteering?
There's, how I found a couple positions are things that, and this is maybe DC related, called like volunteer.org. I think it's what it's called. And they do all kinds of things. I've even volunteered with the Smithsonian, right? And then the day you're at the Smithsonian, you have lunch with the people downstairs and get to see everything behind, and you meet people. A lot of it is just, again, you got to put yourself out there to meet people. And don't be afraid to cold call. The worst they're going to do is like, I mean, I literally got laughed at, again, till people understood why I was doing what I was doing. And then they were like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense, right? Yeah, I mean, I asked a lot of people, look, because I needed help getting my name on things, right? Being part of projects, getting quantitative research skills. You know, I said, can I be a part of this project? I'll work for you for free. You know, and they had to understand, why did that make sense? Why are you doing this? Because it doesn't make sense to them. Why somebody would dedicate, again, so much of your adult life to being trained to do one job and then decide you don't want to do it. Well, you're not just trained to do that one job, right? You're trained to do multiple jobs, but we just don't talk about it that way, right? So that's why I focus so much on changing the conversation. Have the conversation. And I think we're running out of time.